Christian Parenting.
Understanding our own finances is hard enough, let alone knowing how to teach our children. The Family and Finances podcast hopes to take you from a place of stress, worry, and tension to a place of freedom, peace, and unity. If you're looking for peace of mind, contentment, and confidence in dealing with your finances, this is the podcast for you. And today we're going to talk about our financial mistakes. We're going to try to narrow down the list to maybe 5. And that was the hard part about setting up this podcast.
No, we made mistakes from the day we got married.
We started out as a mistake.
I mean, I had student loan debt. I had a lot of scholarships, but I went to a private university and I brought $5,000 of student loan debt into the marriage. And I had a $1,000 gift from my grandmother, I believe. So we were negative $4,000.
So you brought negative $4,000 net worth into the marriage. Mm-hmm. And I really hadn't saved or prepared. We had the philosophy that marriage would be held together by love, and we could pay the rent with love, and we figured it out as we go. So we started out in a negative financial situation.
Right.
And it didn't get better from there.
No, I think we assumed it would because we were both getting ready to graduate.
We were going to start our careers, and we would make money, and we were both working, and we would just solve all these problems. What we didn't realize is that you have to spend so much money to get established and to start a home. And so we're going to list our financial mistakes. I'm going to give you the first one that I think was the most serious, is that we had zero savings. So if an emergency came up, which it always did, we just weren't prepared for it.
I don't think we even knew how important savings were.
No, I hadn't. I mean, I'm not blaming anybody for it. I just didn't have the discipline to be a saver. I didn't see it as something you do as a way of life.
And I didn't see the need for it at our stage of life. I liked to have money in the bank, but I had no concept of car problems or, needing to pay a down payment for a home. It didn't enter my mind what we would need it for.
Yeah, and in my optimism, I assumed that as our income increased, we would always outrun the expenses.
Right.
And so we lived without a safety net, which caused friction because your security orientation, it kept you in a constant state of insecurity. Mm-hmm. And I didn't realize how important it was just for the marriage relationship to have savings. And so ultimately, we had to do something about that. We had to correct that. And maybe let's go through the list of things we did wrong, and then I'll maybe go back through the list of how we corrected it.
Sounds great.
So without savings, you would think that the first thing you needed to do was to live on a strict budget. But we didn't have a budget. Mm-mm. And I didn't want a budget. In fact, when you would bring it up, I remember telling you, I don't want to live on a budget. It sounded like something that people did that were just...
nerds. Brought back memories of accounting class, probably.
Yeah. And I figured if we kept a balance in the checkbook and there was a little bit of money left over, that was a budget. And so without the budget, we literally just were flying blind, hoping to make it to the end of the month. And then the next month we would cycle into maybe a raise, something would come along that would help us out of a mess. And without the budget, we were constantly treading water.
Right.
And I remember that was so stressful to you, but not to me, because I felt like, it'll get better one day. And you were waiting for me to say, hey, that day needs to come now. But for me, it just didn't come. I kept putting it off.
Well, and I think in the back of my mind, it was like, okay, end of the year, we're going to get a bonus, we'll get a raise, then we can save that money. But that didn't happen because we'd spend it.
Well, it led to the third problem, which is the use of credit cards. And when I look back on that, Ann, I can't even believe some of the things we did.
No, it was pretty bad. If we didn't have a credit card, we'd get store credit back then.
Basically, if you think about it, the credit card was a substitute for our savings account. Because we didn't have cash, we would just go and get another credit card. I don't know if you remember this, but Chase Manhattan Bank sent us checks in the mail. And you could literally write a check and pay for things instead of using a piece of plastic. And I used every single one of those checks without knowing that it was 24% interest every time I wrote one of those checks. I used every one of them, the whole limit.
Well, I remember not having enough money to write a check and having to buy diapers. And I just felt so guilty having to use a credit card to buy diapers.
Do you remember having overdraft protection at the bank?
Oh, thank goodness they offered it.
Well, I mean, I don't know if people even have that option today where you have a relationship with your bank. If you write a hot check, they won't bounce it as long as you pay a fee and agree to come in and cover it later. Mm-hmm. Well, we paid for that service so we could write hot checks. In fact, we used to float checks, even for things like diapers. And so we were just dancing on hot coals.
Waiting for our ship to come in.
Yeah, and I was always promising the ship was coming in soon. And on those credit cards, Ann, I remember at one point we had 9 credit cards, or the equivalent of a credit card. Some were those checks. And we had all these store accounts. We would go in and open store credit accounts. And we had a personal line of finance at the bank. So we piled up all kinds of consumer debt.
Yeah, and you were working for your dad and thought that we would hit a well and it would all be fine.
That was it. Yeah, I was going to be like Jed Clampett. One day the oil would come bubbling up out of the ground and we would pay off all the bills. So that was our third financial mistake. We had no savings, no budget, and using credit cards as our safety net. And then we had an issue with the way we wanted to buy cars. So my dad was raised that you buy a new car, you finance it, and you drive it to 100,000 miles and you trade it and get another one. So the way he operated was he always had a car payment. He decided to gift us with a new car as a wedding gift, so maybe he thought we wouldn't have a car payment. But after that one wore out, what did I do?
Well, we bought a new car, but I can't remember which one we bought. Was it the Volvo?
We bought a Volvo, brand new, and financed it.
And I remember my sister driving up one day in a brand new van that they wrote a check for, and I thought, how in the world do you write a check for a car? It was beyond my comprehension.
Me too. I remember thinking, what? I don't even have hardly any money in the bank. How could you buy a car and not have a car payment? In fact, I had adopted the idea that we would always have car payments.
Well, I love the idea of not having one, but I didn't know how to get to that point.
Well, I remember going to the lot and looking at what we wanted and asking, how much is the payment? I didn't ask necessarily how much does a car cost. Mm-hmm. And I didn't think about all the other costs. In fact, the Volvo that we bought, remember why we bought it? Because the advertisement said it was the world's safest car. Yeah. And we decided, all right, if it's the world's safest car and we're having babies, we're going to drive that. And we picked it out and we bought it. And I really do believe I paid for it double. I paid for it twice with the amount of interest we paid on it and the amount of times we had it repaired. It broke down all the time.
Well, it was good at first.
For a little while, but then the air conditioner wouldn't work, the brakes wouldn't work. It had problem after problem after problem. And it really cost us, I think I calculated later, twice the amount of the original purchase price. So if it were a $10,000 car, it was cost us $20,000 over the life of that car. And you would think we would have learned from that. But sort of from then on, every car we bought, we just went down and financed and just took whatever rate there was and assumed that was a natural part of how you lived.
I remember at one point we had a pickup, though. We bought a new pickup. Remember that?
Yes.
And I had taken over payments at this point, and I remembered the joy of doubling up those payments.
Mm-hmm. Well,
That-
once
that
I
was
put you in
great.
charge of paying the bills, they started getting paid on time, and you started reducing our debt. That's some of the corrective action we took. But and just listing the mistakes we made, if you think about it, we have no savings, we have no budget, we're running up debt on credit cards, and then we're borrowing money to drive a car.
Mhm.
So it's like every single bad decision you could make with money, we're doing it and thinking it's normal.
Yeah, but then it got even worse because we're having babies and thinking we need a house.
Well,
How in the world
we
did
did
somebody loan us money for a house?
we did need a house, but the way that I decided to pay for it was the problem. So thinking back on that really was our biggest mistake. I mean, it's the biggest part of your budget, and it's the most devastating mistake you make financially. But at that point, we had some assets. We'd made some investments,
Mhm.
and those investments were improving steadily. The strange thing is, and I'm going to admit this here, I borrowed money. How anybody loaned me money, I don't know. I guess against our salary. But I borrowed money and invested in an oil and gas well, took that kind of risk. Fortunately, it produced to pay that back and to give us some extra income, but I didn't use it to pay down debt.
Yeah.
As that income came in, we decided to buy a house. And I think we had 10% down, which is the minimum. And then we got introduced to private mortgage insurance, PMI. And so we were having to pay that on top of our house payment.
Well, and our rate was outrageous too. Remember? I think your dad was shocked that we bought a house.
Well,
at
that was
time.
back in the hyperinflation days.
Yeah.
And when we went to apply for that loan, mortgage rates were 18%.
Mm-hmm.
Now, people listening right now have the lowest interest rate possible in history, like at 3% for a mortgage. But what we did is we got an adjustable rate mortgage where we were paying 6% for 3 years, and then they would adjust it after that. So you didn't really know how much your payment was going to be in 3 years.
Mm-hmm.
So we took the worst possible financing with the lowest down payment and the private mortgage insurance, and then we did one more thing on top of that. Do you remember?
Well, I don't know if you're going here, but we remodeled.
That's where I was going.
I mean, we bought a wonderful house, great bones, but boy, it needed updating.
And so we updated it and borrowed the money to do that. So imagine how much debt we have. Plus, when we updated it, Ann, we didn't add any square footage to it.
Mm-mm.
We didn't make it larger to make it more valuable. We just made it the way we liked it. And then in the midst of all of that, I lose my job. And so it's like a nightmare scenario. No savings, no budget, consumer debt, car debt, and house debt.
And I'm a housewife.
And by that time, you had stopped working.
Yeah.
And then the well that was producing went dry. Literally, it went dry, the oil and gas well. It stopped producing as well. And when you look back on it, you think, surely God was trying to get our attention.
Mm-hmm.
And yet, with all that pain and all that stress, I still did not get it. I still did not figure out what we were doing wrong.
No, we didn't even go to God for answers, Chuck. We weren't seeking there. We were just seeking for another job.
I was just seeking for more money. In fact, I need to admit this. I always believed that it took more money to solve financial problems, that more money would fix the problem.
Mm-hmm.
That's the worldview that I had. It wasn't that I was mismanaging it. It was that I just didn't have enough. If you think about how illogical that is, the problem wasn't me, it was the lack of money. But I mean, that's what I thought. The real issue was I wasn't managing what I had.
Well, also, Chuck, we moved into 3 houses. We kept moving up,
Yeah.
in a very short period of time.
Right.
3 houses maybe in 5 years or something. It was crazy.
Well, I want to go back through the list and give people some hope.
Okay.
Because young couples are listening now and they're going, wow, that's where we are, or we've done this, or we've done that. How do you fix it? And so I want to go literally back through our list, Ann, but for me, it came to the realization that it wasn't more money that was going to fix it. It was the management improvement of what we had that would fix it. And so God had to get our attention, which he did. And we said, God, you own everything. We want to do this differently. Let's start doing it your way. And what we did that's not on this list that I think changed everything is we made giving our top priority because we weren't giving at that time. I mean, not enough.
No, and I felt very convicted that we were years behind on giving.
Yeah, because we were just laden with debt. So we decided to start tithing. And I remember I thought this is the craziest thing we could possibly be doing when we're not doing all this other stuff right. But you wisely knew that it would reset our financial priorities. If God would become first, then we would have to fix these other things on 90% instead of thinking that we had to do it by keeping 100%. So we started saving little by little. And it just took the discipline to start saying no to what we wanted, to start looking for deals, to start buying wisely, to start really reshaping our mindset to where we would give first, save second. And that was after 21 years of doing it the wrong way. But that little shift, all of a sudden, we started creating margin in our life. And margin reduces your stress, and it helps you to make better financial decisions just by giving and saving first. And then what did we do next? Got on a budget.
So we had to figure out add up all our expenses and figure out how we were going to keep those under the income.
Well, do you remember we went to a cash budget for a long time, where we literally would divide the cash that we got paid and put it in envelopes. And our premise was we had to spend less than we were earning. Otherwise, we couldn't give and save. And that brought sanity into our life.
I think that's where I discovered garage sales and Goodwill.
Yeah, and you started saying, whatever it takes, we're going to spend less than whatever we're earning so that we could give and save every month. And then suddenly we started having margin and had stability, and emergencies could be paid for. And then we attacked the credit cards. What do we do today with credit cards? Give people some advice on that.
Well, I think the big thing for us is we don't carry a balance because we don't want to pay interest. So when we use our credit card, which we use frequently, my goodness, we use our credit card a lot, but we pay it off at the end of the month.
Essentially, it's not a credit card because we don't ever pay interest or penalties on it. I mean, it functions like a short-term loan, but we're never in debt because we have the money to pay for it.
Right.
And we never go over our limit. We never get near our limit. In fact, they keep raising our limit because we've been so faithful over the years. We have this huge limit that we're never even close to using. Pay it off every month, and we only use one credit card.
There have been times I've thought we've needed more, but you're pretty adamant that we just need one.
Well, we get all those bonus miles.
Right. And we're sure using those right now, aren't we?
Yeah, we're not using the bonus miles right now. So, Ann, how do we do our cars differently than the way we used to?
Well, now we do write a check for them. We learn to save up, and you're a great buyer of used cars. And you have just several principles you go by when you're looking for a new one, and it may take you a year, but you find us good ones.
Well, we usually look for a car for a year. Once we've decided we're in the market for a car, you and I both research. We look very diligently to find what we want, do all of the analysis of what would work best for us, find it used. Why do we buy used?
Well, because we don't have depreciation, and it's so much cheaper.
It's easier to write a check for it.
Yeah.
And so we both now drive used cars. We have no car payments. And I think that saves in our budget about 14% of what most Americans pay today for transportation when you borrow money to buy a car, they're paying up to 14% of their budget month after month. We don't have that expense, which means it allows us to give more and to save more. And then let's talk about houses. This is where so many make a mistake. Our principles today are at least 20% down payment, no PMI, and no borrowing against your equity as a home equity loan where you're constantly using the money that you have stored in your house value.
And we only pay cash for any remodel or
any improvements.
Yeah.
And so by doing that, we stay out of trouble of ever getting upside down on a mortgage or ever in a bind of not being able to pay our mortgage. And so we've gone much more conservatively than we've ever been when it comes to houses. The cost of your house should be less than 40% of your total budget. And we've tried to stay well below that. And I know you've done the research on super savers. Super savers spend, 10% on their housing cost?
A lot of them are very content living in tiny homes so that they can invest and save and put their money to work.
And one thing that most people don't realize today is that 50% of the people who live in a home today, it's paid for. And that seemed way inconceivable to us years ago, just like paying cash for a car. But it's doable if you steadily work the system where you pay extra down on your principal as you're able, get low interest loan. We believe in a long-term mortgage, no adjustable rate mortgage. And we're always trying to advise young people, save the money before you get into a house because there's always going to be an expense.
Right.
Did I leave anything out, Ann, of major financial mistakes that we've made?
Those are the biggies. You want to go over them again?
Yeah, go ahead.
So we started with no savings. So should we make it a positive?
Yeah.
Save.
Yeah, save first.
Save first.
Give to the Lord. Be sure that giving is your financial priority so that you're not materialistic.
Get on a budget. Would you put that next?
Yeah, because if you don't have a budget, how are you ever going to create financial margin? I think we need to go into how to get on a budget and stay on a budget in a future podcast.
Okay.
But it's definitely an essential part of keeping on plan.
And then paying your credit cards off at the end of the month. And there, we'll probably get into that, how to get out of credit card debt.
Well, we don't believe in any kind of consumer debt. We don't have any store accounts. We don't open those store accounts every time they offer them when you check out at these stores. We always tell them no. We only carry one. We pay off our balance. And we have no consumer debt whatsoever and never want any again.
No, and part of that is because we learned to wait and to exercise self-control.
Well, we learned how painful it is. You really can't make financial progress if you're constantly paying high interest on consumer debt. It's the worst form of debt. And then we changed the way we do cars. Tell them what we're driving right now.
Oh, let's see. I drive a Highlander. I don't know what year it is. 15 maybe?
2015. And how long have you had it?
A year.
1 year. So it's new to you.
Oh gosh, before I got it, I was embarrassed. I went to a party and I parked where the employees parked because I didn't want anybody to see my car. That's pitiful to be
Well,
that.
it was a little dirty that day.
Had a broken windshield.
It
was in bad shape.
It was a 2006, so you drove it 14 years.
And it ran well. It ran great. But it was not looking very pretty.
Yeah, so you upgraded and got a 2015. I'm still driving a 2007. Both paid for, both maintenance free, just about.
Everybody in the family drives Toyotas because they've served us well.
Yeah. And then last is to be careful when you buy a house. Because it's the biggest financial mistake that you can make is to have too much house and become house poor.
And you're big on where you buy a house.
Well, I'm big on buying a house that you have stored value in. I want to buy a house that other people might want to buy in the future so that you never get stuck if you have to move or you lose your job. So that's the mistakes we made and how we've recovered. If you divide it sort of in half, our first 21 years were difficult and challenging going backwards. And the second 21 so far have been the opposite of that.
Steady plodding.
Making very good progress. The biblical principle of steady plodding brings prosperity. Hasty speculation brings poverty. And one of the reasons that we're so committed to helping people, Ann, is that pain was immense. And it didn't look like we would get out of it at some point, that we would even recover from it, not only financially, but just emotionally, the trauma of it. And so we really are passionate about helping people do it differently from a young age.
Right.
Because they never have to dig the hole that we dug.
No, if they can start young, they'll be way down the road. I wish we could go back and do it differently, but we learned these lessons for a reason.
Yeah, if we did it differently, it would be a dramatically improved financial picture from doing it right, starting out. And I hope the people that are hearing this will be encouraged that you can make as many mistakes as we did and still recover.
Right.
Thanks, Sam.
Thank you. Thank God for all he's taught us.
Amen. Look forward to the next one.